Ladies and gentlemen, it's Saturday, it's Scotland, it's 1 p.m, and we're back in original form, the legible, credible, inevitable storm, which is a force for good, coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the great British city of Glasgow. With me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting live on Facebook and broadcasting live on Twitter. And you know, this is the place where we've got it all figured out and there ain't no worries that we're worried about. But obviously we've got concerns, and some of these concerns we will speak to you today about. And we usually start the programme with an update of the COVID carry-on. We're not going to really talk about that very much today because the COVID carry-on is just carrying on. And we see people walking about in broad daylight in public wearing these masks, which is quite a disturbing thing, actually. At least we find it to be quite disturbing to see people like disguising their face. Normally that would be an illegal act. So that concerns us, but we don't wear a mask, and some of the local shops here, they don't insist that you wear a mask either. So we're doing a lot more local shopping than we are normally going into supermarkets or any of that kind of carry on, because you know we like our individuality, as most unionists do. Now, what I'm going to go straight into though is the Boris Johnson visit to Scotland. And he came up yesterday, almost a year to the day almost, last year when he came up for the very first time. And we were struck when he came up last year because for some reason his advisors thought it would be a good idea for him to pay homage at the shrine of Nicola. And so they escorted him in a car outside Bute House, which is in Edinburgh, which is the so-called official residence of the First Minister. And who thought this was a good idea? And this just shows how people were not advising him properly last year. So he had to get out the car, and then Nicola's standing at the top of the steps looking down on the Prime Minister of Scotland, right? She's standing there like the Queen of Sheba from a Cecil B. DeMille movie or something like that. She's standing at the top of the steps, and Boris, he wasn't exactly on his hands and knees crawling up the steps. But what an absurd image that gave of the Prime Minister of Scotland coming to pay homage to a junior minister. A junior minister. We have to understand the British state is the body that created Holyrood. Holyrood is an arm. It's a devolved arm of the British state. And all the people who work in Holyrood are junior to the British state. That's the way that it works. That's just the way it's meant to work. And that's the right way up that it's working. So you don't have Boris Johnson climbing the steps and Nicola's glaring at him like, who's this that's arrived on my doorstep? Who is this that's sullying the steps of Bute House? Like, she's looking at him just like so negatively, and he's like all sheepishly climbing up the stairs. And I'm just like, this is just terrible. Whose idea was this? Whose idea was this? What should have happened was he should have been in Holyrood. He should have a Prime Minister's office in Holyrood, because it's his creation, or at least it's the British state's creation. So there should be an office, say, in Holyrood or thereabouts, where the First Minister comes and visits the Prime Minister when the Prime Minister of Scotland is in Scotland. That's the correct way. It's not Nicola here and the Prime Minister of Scotland here. It's the Prime Minister in the British state here, and everybody else is an arm of that. It's a vertical relationship. It's a hierarchical relationship. It's not a relationship of equals. Okay? And this, as we've always said, this point has been confused as soon as they started calling the SNP administration a government. that confused it in the minds of everybody, as if the Scottish government was the same as the British government with the same powers and so on. It's not. It's the British government and the Scottish and devolved administrations, which are arms of the British state. And if Boris took a lesson from that song that I played us in there, he needs to understand he is the protector of the state. He's the protector of the state, the defender of the faith. So that's the correct way up, and he should not be embarrassed or anything like that when he comes to Scotland. And when he came to Scotland last year, we actually wrote him an open letter, which is worth revisiting at the moment. It's worth revisiting, and we sent it out when he arrived last week. We sent it out again to great acclaim, got massive traction, and we pointed out just several things to him. Greg, good afternoon to you. Kath's given us a wave, thanks for that. We pointed out several things to him, one of which was don't be bothered by the SNP calling you like an old Etonian or anything like that, because they will play to those old prejudices, but that shouldn't bother you. You know, Scotland's had old Etonian prime ministers since probably the dawn of time, or the dawn of the Union anyway, we should say. So that's not a big issue. Don't be put off by that, or that you're English, you know, and you got a posh accent or whatever. Don't let that put you off, okay? Because that's just what they do, you know. That's just what they do. Our welcome to Scotland for the PM. There it is, up there. Somebody has posted that there on our comment thread. That's a great article. Give a wave to all those folk who are watching. Thanks for coming in on Twitter and on Facebook. Now, the second point that we made to him as well is don't be thinking that the SNP represents Scotland. The SNP represents the people who voted for them, or at least most of the people who vote for them. It doesn't represent everybody else. We're stuck with the SNP, obviously, just because that's the way that the political process works, but they don't represent Scotland. They represent the Scottish National Party and the people who agree with that tendency. Thirdly, don't be intimidated by their claim to be the government. In fact, it's your job to correct that terminology. And if we're going to have a new Scotland Act or something like that, that needs to be made clear. And that phrase needs to be, it needs to be taken away. And if it can't be taken away practically, then when we speak about it, we should always avoid talking about the Scottish government, because it's the Scottish administration. If we say Scottish government, it simply puts it on exactly the same plane as the British government, and that confuses the issue, and it makes it look like Holyrood is already a sovereign parliament with independent powers, which is not, and which it can't be. Otherwise, we'll get all the problems that we've always spoken about here with if we had an independent Scotland separated from the rest of these islands. And fourthly, we advised him not to give the SNP any more powers, because they will take them without thanks, they'll bank them, then they'll pretend that they never received them. Fraser's given us a thumbs up there. Thanks for that, Fraser. So that's what we suggested to him last year, and that's what we suggest to him again this year. And make sure you get your terminology in order. Don't speak so much about our union of nations. Talk much more about our nation of unions. Don't talk so much about our family of nations. Talk much more about our literal nation of families, which is what we are. We are a nation of families, quite literally, just as we are a nation of unions. Unions that go right back to the dawn of time. So he came along yesterday, and I noticed on one or two reports that there was a handful of people who were opposed to him, but of course they get all the publicity. Now, my advice to the Scottish Tory party, and I don't know how well organised you are on the ground, but if the Prime Minister of Scotland is coming to Scotland and you know where he's going to be, try to rustle up some local folk, you know, to stand and wave a Union Jack or welcome Boris or something like that. It's very easily done, you know. I know that 99.9% of most people are totally apathetic and think somebody else will do it, but the bottom of the line is nobody else will do it unless you do it. Okay, so that's the way it works. So we're not going to do something like that really because we're non-party political, but we do respect the office. We do respect the office of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who is the Prime Minister of Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales. So we respect that office, even though we particularly stay away from party politics as such. However, the Scottish Tories should be right in there. Go in there, wave a flag, welcome him, do what you have to do, but somebody has to do it. Otherwise, the optics are dominated by your opposition. That's the way it works. You always have to think of what are the optics, what can we do here to make this a good thing. Now, I will say one point. At the start of the year, we at A Force for Good did invite Boris to join us, but that was a different thing. What that was about was we were having one of our Thin Red Line counter demos when the Scottish Nationalists were passing. I was on the platform talking through a megaphone, and we thought it would be a fantastic idea if Boris was there, because that's a perfect opportunity for him to shine, quite frankly, to shine. So we sent him an open invitation to Scotland's Prime Minister to join our Thin Red Line. And that open invitation is on our website, aforceforgood.uk. And in it, we pointed out to him that there was no other better place than for him to sell his wares and to show his personality and to let his unique character flourish than in a combative, if you shall say, situation like that. And we said you'd be in a dynamic non-party environment, being seen to take your opposition head on, lancing the boil, as it were. You will be showing that you are proud to be Scotland's Prime Minister and that you're happy to stand up for the Union and to speak for the majority who support it. And visually, you'd be surrounded by British flags, held by patriotic Unionists, and this is an action which is suited to your flamboyant character. And we said, well, what other alternatives do you really have? Are you going to go to the media and sit in a room with some of the SNP TV people who are just out to make you look silly or to make you feel unwelcome? You shouldn't go anywhere near these groups, okay, because they're not going to do you any favours. So you need to be the story. You create the media yourself. You could be good at that. So that's the invite that we extended to him, and lo and behold, he got back to us with this really nice letter from an officer at 10 Downing Street who said, "Thank you for your letter to the Prime Minister, inviting him to join with you on behalf of A Force for Good. It was very kind of you to extend this invitation. Unfortunately, it is not possible for the Prime Minister to accept on this occasion." So that was a really nice letter that he got sent back on behalf of the Prime Minister to A Force for Good. Needless to say, the national newspaper picked up on that and they went ballistic about that. But good stuff, good stuff. But we will, once we get back to that Thin Red Line action, we'll be inviting Boris to all of our events, and who knows, you might even see him one day. Yeah, others are saying maybe there's other Tories who could do something like that. Well, if they wanted to join us, we would definitely take an open mind. If anybody from any other party wanted to join the Thin Red Line speaking, you know, if they were a well-known character, we would think about it. We would think about it, and we would see what the options were for us. So we would leave that open, definitely. Give a wave there to somebody that's watching in. May's commenting on what we just said there. Aye, so that's the Boris Johnson thing. Else in the news this week has been this free speech issue that's going on. Now, some of you may or may not know that the Scottish Parliament is thinking of bringing in what many of us would regard as a draconian anti-free speech law. Now, they couch it, of course, in terms of anti-hate, because that's an easy phrase to use. Who wants to be called a hater? for example. So they call their anti-free speech laws anti-hate laws. And yesterday was the closing date for views, for submissions on this, prior to them debating it in Holyrood. And we sent in our submission, which you can read on our website. It's called Free Speech for Scots. And it's part of a wider document that we've written on this subject, some of which I'm going to cover today. Gilbert says, I will proudly stand with voters of any party. Absolutely. Well, voters of all parties are welcome to stand with us. Absolutely. Who gets to stand on our platform? That's a different matter, you know, on our actual platform with the megaphone, obviously. But voters from any party and supporters of any party are welcome to stand with a force for good, as they do. Free speech for Scots. There it is. The link has been posted in the comment thread. Now, we sent in our submission to the Justice Committee. We explained who we are and why we are interested in this, because we do take part in activities, a broad range of activities which are thematically consistent with our main message, which is keeping the United Kingdom together. However, we know that there are people who disagree with us and would try to pin us down with these anti-free speech laws if they but could. So we've got to be very conscious of such people and how they go about doing it. But what we did was we summarised our general position, and then we said, look, we know this is likely to go ahead anyway. So in regard to the bill, here are our recommendations, and I'm just going to run through some of that with you now. Now, our fundamental position as a group, as a force for good, is that we disapprove of these laws, which are called hate laws. We believe that they are intended to constrain the limits of debate on certain potentially controversial issues. And so as such, they represent a political concept far more than they represent a legal concept. And we disapprove of the idea that there are certain categories of people who should be listed as specially favoured in some way, as kind of protected species almost. We disapprove of that sort of language and those sorts of ideas, because we should all be equal under the law, regardless of what our particular characteristics may be. We also understand that speech should be tempered where necessary to avoid giving offence, and we try always to avoid giving hurt, because that's the worst thing really, is giving hurt. We try to avoid giving hurt to people, and that's important to try to do in all of our actions and in everything that comes out of our mouth. Try to avoid giving hurt. However, we do believe that the proposed legislation does threaten freedom of expression and will tend to individuals and organisations from feeling free to express or share or support certain views on certain matters. And that's the way that it works, because once you start saying, well, you can't talk about those sorts of things or those sorts of people in those sorts of ways, then you constrain debate to the point where reality becomes very strange. Because as we always say, reality is created by words which come out of your mouth. So if you can't say certain things, then the reality becomes very strange indeed, as a consequence of you not being able to say certain things. We saw an example this week. The Metropolitan Police was saying something about how they thought that they should stop referring to Islamist suicide bombers, and they had other fangled phrases that they were coming up with. And, you know, why couldn't they say that? For an example, last 7/7 in July was the date when there was Islamicist terrorist bombs went off in London. And Sky News reported one story as bus blows up. Okay, like, so if you had just arrived from Mars and you thought, oh, a bus has blown up, I wonder how that happened. Did it, was there a petrol leak? Oh, no, there wasn't a petrol leak. All right, what, did it crash into the back of an oil tanker? No, it didn't crash into the back of an oil tanker. What, did like a helicopter crash into it or something? No, it did, but it just kind of blew up. You know, the bus just blew up. Oh, well, you know, there may have been, like, you know, a person on board who was involved in, you know, like a chemical reaction, you know, a sort of rapid oxidization process whereby gas expanded at a huge temperature and at such a force that the structural integrity of the bus couldn't sustain it. It was like that. All right. What do you mean, like somebody blew themselves up? Yes, somebody blew themselves up. So very often that can just be the consequences of the debate. You know, we don't talk anymore about suicide bombers or anything like that. We talk about, say, faith-based people involved with a faith-based rapid oxidation process. That will be the new term for a suicide bomber. A person involved in a faith-based rapid oxidation process. Faith-based rapid oxidizers, that's what we'll call them. Faith-based rapid oxidizers. That will probably be the new phrase now for suicide bombers. And so you don't really know, well, what's a faith-based rapid oxidizer? You know, and you have to go to the dictionary, and the dictionary won't really tell you that either. So you just have to sort of work it out if you know chemistry. So yeah, that's one of the problems with hate laws, is that they make people worried about what they're actually going to say, and makes them not want to say it, and therefore lets a lot of things go by default. Andy saying should be called what it is. Well, yeah, call it what it is, and then you know what you're dealing with. And if you don't know what you're dealing with, then you will come off worse. You will come off worse because you will be unable to explain the nature of your reality. Give a wave there. And somebody saying it all sounds very impersonal, as no one's to blame. Yeah, that's also an angle. It's like, well, nobody or no idea is really to blame here. It's like we're all guilty at the end of the day. We're all guilty. And of course, there's lots of people who make a lot of good money from that sort of attitude. Lots of lawyers who want to perpetuate that process, who are making big money. I mean, there's easy money to make in hate crime law. I've got a degree in Scots law, which I was a mature student when I went back to Strathclyde University, and I studied this, and so I've got a lot to say about it, a lot to say about a lot of things related to Scots law, because I've studied it in considerable depth and came up with ideas that are really, even though I say it myself, really quite original, and we're going to be putting these out in the next week or so. So yeah, our recommendations, after we told the Justice Committee that we don't agree with the principle of this anyway, we do know that this is going to happen in some form. So here is our recommendations. And the first recommendation was to drop Part 1. Now, Part 1 creates what's called aggravated offences. Now, an aggravated offence is allegedly made worse if you're doing it as a consequence of some kind of prejudice. So, if, for example, somebody comes up to me and beats me up, then that's bad enough. But if they come up and they say, I'm doing this to you because I've just heard Humza Yousaf say that all the top jobs in Scotland are occupied by white people, and I don't like that fact, then that would be racially aggravated. And the person would potentially get a worse sentence. Now, when you think about it, that's really odd, because why should why should that prejudice make a crime worse? When all else is equal, why does it matter why you hated the person? Okay, maybe you just hate the person because you don't like the way that he looks. Or, so why is that made worse if because you don't like the colour of his skin? You know what I mean? So it's aggravated offences came in 1998 with the Crime and Disorder Act, and prior to that there was a lot of debate, just as the sort of things that I'm saying about that, a lot of debate about it, and the Times newspaper was opposed to aggravated offences, and it said that people that crimes should not be treated more seriously as a consequence of the alleged prejudice of the criminal. They said that set up a statutory hierarchy of wickedness, where crimes against some people are worse than crimes against other people, and that is surely still the moral case for it. So we don't like that. We don't think that we don't believe that aggravated offences can be justified morally where all else is equal. And we would see that as a political concept as rather than a legal concept. As we said in our submission, it is because some politicians want certain categories of people to be specially protected for political and ideological reasons. And that's really the bottom line with aggravated offences. So we recommended that Part 1 of the bill, which set up the intention to, quote, treat crimes motivated by prejudice more seriously, we think that should just be abolished, because we do believe that's morally wrong. It can't be justified morally. It can only be justified politically. And it's not just us saying that. That's what many people were saying prior to aggravated crimes going on the statute book, which was back in 1998. So that was our first recommendation. Our second recommendation, and this is where we have to look at the purpose of the bill. Now, the bill creates a crime. It creates two crimes. It creates the crime of stirring up hatred, and it creates the crime of likely to stir up hatred. Now, that stirring up, intentional or otherwise, can be done through the words that one uses. It can be done through threatening, abusive, or insulting words. Now, there's no definition of what those words constitute, and in fact, under the Public Order Act 1986, which this bill is kind of modelled upon, it is actually a defence to say that it was an abusive language, but it was abusive language that did not stir up hatred. So threatening and abusive and insulting words per se are not the crime. The crime is, do they stir up hatred? Or are they likely to stir up hatred? Now, clearly, straight away, how on earth do you judge that? That is entirely subjective. Entirely subjective. What one person may find threatening words, another person will not be bothered at all. What one person may find abusive, another person's not going to be bothered. What some people may find insulting, another person doesn't find it insulting, or they'll just let it fly, you know. So how can it's entirely subjective whether or not those words are genuinely threatening, abusive, and insulting, and whether or not they are likely to stir up hatred or definitely will stir up hatred. It's just a subjective matter. It's not black and white. It's not clear cut at all. So that's one of the real problems with it in the first place. And you know, we gave the example there of Humza Yousaf on the 10th of June 2020. He was in the Scottish Parliament, and in some people's opinion, he was stirring up hate. He was standing there going on about how he didn't like all these white people, the white people who are in positions of power in Scotland. The Lord Advocate, white. The governor of this, white. Oh, he was spitting it out, man. He was spitting it out. And I'm like, whoa, I think that's moronic what he said. I think it's foolish what he said. But I don't think that it's stirring up hatred necessarily. But some people will think it's stirring up hatred. And why not? Why not? So, you know, he could fall foul. He could fall foul of his own law. And we also pointed out that we don't think, and this is serious, we don't think he actually understands that the crime is stirring up hatred or likely to stir up hatred. We think he just thinks it's the words. If you say an abusive word, that's bad enough. That's our thought. Maybe he'll contact us and tell us that he knows better. But from everything that we've seen, we think he thinks the law is the words that are used. But it's not the words that are used. It's whether those words stir up hatred. And if they stir up hatred, or if they're likely to stir up hatred, then he is... that's the crime. Then that's the crime. Robert's saying he's on another planet, and he suggesting that he was potentially stirring up hatred. That's correct. So we don't like that idea of stirring up hatred. We don't see how it can properly be, how there can be any kind of consistent judgment from court to court on that. It's very much just a matter of opinion. And as such, it's poor law, and it will encourage a lot of people just not to do anything or say anything. And consequently, that will make matters worse in society, like what I was saying there about the bus blowing up. You know, people will be afraid to even say who blew the bus up as a consequence of its rapid oxidation. So we did state that, but the best that we can really do with this is to try to get the likely to stir up hatred crime removed. Because think about it, if you say something deliberately intended to stir up hatred, then, okay, you shouldn't really have been stirring up hatred deliberately. We can all agree with that. But what about if somebody just says, oh, it's likely to stir up hatred, and you didn't have the intention to do that? You didn't have the intention to do it, but somebody's saying, oh, but it could do it. It's likely it could do it. So what that is trying to create a crime without the guilty mind. And in Scots law and in English law, there is a concept called mens rea, which is Latin for the guilty mind. And to be convicted of a crime, you have to be guilty of... They have to show that you have the guilty mind. You have to be shown to have done it intentionally because you wanted to do it. And the idea of convicting somebody who had no intention of doing something that transpires, well, that's not a proper legal concept. It's a very unusual legal concept, and it's not a legal concept that has a proper precedent in Scots law. So that should be removed, and it could easily be removed simply by appealing to Scots law. And so we suggested that as well. And our third recommendation is there's a clause there, Part 2, Section 9, which attempts to convict everybody in a company or in an organisation if one person has done the crime. So what this is a deliberate attempt by Holyrood to do is to shut down organisations in their entirety, to convict everybody, company directors and so on the basis of one of them having committed the crime. That everybody has what's called criminal liability for the actions of another, even if only through neglect, if only through not telling that person not to do it or not being aware that that person was going to say it. Doesn't matter, that's not a defence. You have criminal liability if you are what's called a responsible individual in a company or organisation, along with that other person. That's very serious, very, very serious. Somebody's saying they're singing a religious song could be likely to stir up hatred in some people's eyes. That's certainly so. That's certainly so. So we have to remove the responsibility, remove liability from what's called responsible individuals. That's a ridiculous clause that's in there, deliberately, a deliberate political clause. And the fourth recommendation, and I do suggest that you read this, it's at aforceforgood.uk. Look for Free Speech for Scots. It's our last article, it's up there. We've made a proper clause which fully protects, as best as we can in these circumstances, freedom of expression. Because we know this is just going to come down to a matter of opinion in the courts. So you need a really watertight, fail-safe freedom of expression clause. And we've got a 6-paragraph freedom of expression clause, and it's based upon law that already exists in the United Kingdom. And we've also taken some ideas from US and Canadian law on free speech as well, in order to put together a really fail-safe, what we believe is a pretty fail-safe freedom of expression clause, because the freedom of expression clauses that are in there at the moment are not strong enough, at all. So that was a really good piece of work. We spent the whole week doing that, and we've also got another couple of articles that have come from that, which we'll roll out over the next month or so on our website, because this is going to run and run, and it really has to be. The SNP needs to be brought down over this, because it's a lot of it is unacceptable, and there's also the Tories and Labour who are going along with a lot of this, which is a real pity. Again, it's maybe because they don't fully understand it. Goodness me, a lot of this law is arcane. It's deliberately made to be difficult to understand, to confuse people. So what we're going to try to do as much as we can is to make it simple for you, so you understand how this affects you and how it affects your life. And it does affect our lives, and it affects everything that we say around us. And we can't allow this bill to stand as it stands at the moment. Chris is saying, share this, folks. Absolutely share this, because there's very few places you're going to find where people can lay this stuff out in a very clear way, in the way that we can do. We've just had a lot of practice at doing that. We've been working in this field for over 20 years, and we understand it's about taking complex ideas and making them easy to understand, so people can remember, so people can understand, remember, and repeat them. And that's what we're particularly good at here at A Force for Good. And we've got a lot of content at aforceforgood.uk, and a lot of content also still on our old legacy site, aforceforgood.org.uk. And if you're going to check in on aforceforgood.uk, please have a look at our fantastic little AFFG flag badge, which is a copy of this badge here. That's selling very well, as is our Union Heart badge, which people are buying several of these at once, one for every member of the family. And it's a Union Heart with A Force for Good written through the middle. And every time we see that, it reminds us of the Scottish King James VI, who created that flag in the first place back at the start of the 17th century. So the free speech thing is going to run and run. Humza's on Twitter every day going, why do people want to hate? Isn't it wrong that people hate? How can people hate? Why should they be nasty? It's nothing to do with hate, mate. It's about free speech. You're trying to stop people from saying their thing, and you're trying to make it look like things that you disagree with, you're going to brand as hate. Okay, you want to brand everything you disagree with as hate. And that can be quite an effective idea, because, you know, nobody wants to be thought of as a hater. Give a wave there to people. So they use this word hate when really what they mean is like anti-free speech. So this is all about the free speech laws and the anti-free speech laws. And at the end of the day, a lot of it just comes down to a matter of opinion and perception. And in a later article and in another broadcast, I'll go into what does constitute a hate crime, because it is all about the perception of the person who perceives it. And if I had wanted to, I could have reported Humza Yousaf for what he said in the Scottish Parliament, and the police would come round and they would record it as a hate incident. It probably wouldn't pass the burden of proof, so-called, to be taken to court, but it would be noted down as a hate incident. I didn't bother with that because, like, I'm not the kind of person that's going to do that, but that's what you could do if you wanted. You know, you could report him for hate, see how he likes a taste of his own medicine. But we don't advise that, and we don't suggest that you do that. It's just we're using that as an example of the sort of thing that he's letting himself potentially in for, which is ridiculous when you think about it. So we'll be talking more about those hate crimes in further broadcasts. And, you know, today's the 25th, and it was on the 27th of this month last year that we were in Campbelltown. We were in Campbelltown with our thin red line because the Scottish Nationalists were having a march in Campbelltown. So we went all the way over there to Campbelltown. Good crowd of us. Met up with some great folks from Campbelltown. That was on the 27th of July. And of course we counted the marchers. There was 974 of them. They said there was 2,500. They said there was 2,000. They said there was 2,000 of them. There was 974, but we count the Scottish Nationalists at all of these events. And we went all the way over to the Mull of Kintyre. Far did we travel, and much did we see. Scot Nats bust in from as far as Dundee. Face-painted marchers with costumes so dire as they wobbled the streets of the Mull of Kintyre. And we sang that song to them as they wobbled past us. And it was also the day when we launched our first ever magazine, Union Heart, which there's now a second edition out as well. And Union Heart is available free of charge to everybody who supports us monthly. So if you're a monthly donor as part of our Union Supporters Programme, you get a free badge, and you also get a copy of Union Heart sent to you whenever it is published. So to become a monthly supporter, go to aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters, because we really need you guys. You're the folk that we depend upon. Thank you very much for that, and you keep this show on the road. And now on Twitter, we've just surpassed 29,000 followers. That is absolutely amazing. 29,000 followers. This time last year, we had around about 10,000. We didn't even have 10,000. But as soon as we hit 10,000, we started to take off, and there's no stopping us now. And we want to hit 40,000 by the end of this year, because we need to go into 2021, which is the critical election year, with as big a reach as possible. So please do, if you're not already following us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. And thank you to our Facebook crew, our Twitter crew, and our Instagram crew, who are making these the foremost social media platforms for the pro-British unionist message here in Scotland. Thank you. Thank you to everybody behind the scenes who ensures that this goes ahead, and thank you for everybody who supports us. Somebody making a point there on Twitter. Sounds good. There is our Union Heart magazine launched. Somebody's put that there in the comments. Also on the 27th of July, the British Central Bank was established by several businessmen, one of whom was the Scotsman William Patterson of Darien fame. And it was actually set up as a private bank, and it remained a semi-private bank right up until its nationalisation in 1946, when we argue that its name should have changed to become the British Central Bank when it became nationalised. And we actually wrote an article on that. The British Central Bank is misnamed these days, and I think that does lead to confusion, and it certainly leads to confusion as far as the currency is concerned. But give that article a check out. It's on aforceforgood.uk. as well. Also on the 27th of July, London 2012, that was opened. That was the Olympic Games when the United Kingdom, Team GB, did extremely well and came third. And we wrote a very good article on that, which is on our old legacy site. And we say that the success of Team GB at that event helped to remind us that the story of Britain is the story of a nation which is greater than the sum of its parts. A story which has the ability to inspire, to encourage, to excite, and fill us with enthusiasm for all the good we can achieve when we work together. It's hard to understand those who want to rip Scotland's story out of this bigger story, who want to tear out Scotland's part in it. And we've written about this in our wee book for the Union, which is now in its 2nd edition. We touched on the importance there of all of the United Kingdom cheering for Scots and Team GB, who helped to ensure we came third. And indeed, 4 years later, we came second. And that's in a wee book for the Union. That's selling very well. This is our 2nd edition. Please, we'll put the link up there and do buy one. It's only a £5. It's only a £5, but it's packed with lots of little good sound bites and lots of little good bits of knowledge. And why don't you buy 2 and send one to your MP, or send one to your MSP, or send one to a family member or anything like that. But it's only a £5, and that includes postage, and we will fire that off to you. You buy that today, we'll put it in the post for you this evening. A wee book for the Union. On the 30th of July, I don't know if anybody can remember what happened on the 30th of July. I'll just leave that one hanging for a minute or two. On the great day in British history, the 30th of July, on a certain year, on the 31st of July, Joseph McGuinness, VC, performed the act of bravery for which he was awarded the decoration. And Joseph McGuinness is a famous person in British history because he's the only native of Northern Ireland to have received the VC during World War II. And he was born to a Roman Catholic family on the Falls Road, and he was a submarine diver, and his mini-sub was laying limpet mines at the bottom of a ship. And he was he laid the mines, but he was totally exhausted. He got back into the craft, and the craft got caught under the ship because of various accoutrements regarding the limpet mines. And so he volunteered to get back out and to clear all of this away again, even though he could be sighted by the enemy. And after 7 minutes of nerve-wracking work, he succeeded in releasing the carrier. He displayed very great courage and devotion to duty and complete disregard for his own safety. And he passed away in 1986 in Shipley, and is buried at the Nab Wood Crematorium. And there's a quite impressive wall memorial which is dedicated to him, or at least there was one in East Belfast. We'll put a picture of that up on the 31st. So yeah, on the 30th of July was when England won the World Cup in 1966. 54 years ago. 54 years ago. Amazing day for British sport. Ladies and gentlemen, please go to aforceforgood.uk/support if you just want to give us your name and email. We've got some really good activism coming up tomorrow. We're not going to say where it is or anything like that, but we're going to be doing a live broadcast. It's a special assignment outside. We're going to be doing a live broadcast on Twitter and on Facebook, Wi-Fi permitting. and that's going to last for half an hour, and it's probably going to be about 12:30. So do check in on the pages around about 12:30 to find a really good piece of activism that we're going to be doing, because we've been concerned lately that some people have been sending out negative vibes to particularly people in England, but people throughout the rest of the United Kingdom. So we want to send out some good vibes to the rest of the people in our United Kingdom, and we've got a thing that we'll be doing tomorrow, and we'll have 10 of us there, and it's going to be some really good theatre, and you're going to enjoy it. So that's tomorrow Sunday at 12:30. Please do tune in. That will be live. If we're not able to get a signal because of where we are, then we'll put up a message saying that. But what we'll do is we'll film it anyway, and we'll get the film up on YouTube. And talking about YouTube, we're still, for some reason, we just don't have the subscribers on YouTube. We need to broadcast live on YouTube via a mobile phone, not via a computer browser, but via a mobile phone. We need 1,000 subscribers before YouTube will let us do that, and we don't have that. We don't have that yet, and we're putting out a lot of good content on YouTube. So please do check it out. Most of our stuff is seen on Facebook and Twitter, but we're also making sure that every video we do goes up on YouTube, including this broadcast, this Saturday street stall every week. This is our 17th Saturday street stall, and we have no intention of stopping this, because it's a really good way of reaching out. And next year is going to be the all-important year, 2021, when we are really going to have to pull out the stops in order to ensure that the SNP does not get a full mandate to continue its campaign of division. That we need to see the protectors of the state, coming forward and standing up for our United Kingdom, standing up for Britain, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And we're going to be doing that, but we need to be in a position where we can do that. So we need as big a following on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram and on YouTube as we possibly can. So all hands on deck this year in order to get us as big a profile as we possibly can, our organisation as big a profile as we possibly can. And you can help by going to aforceforgood.uk/donate to. Just drop us a message in there, drop us some cash as well, or buy the wee book for the union, which will also help you to argue the case for the union. And as we say in here, this is about a story. It's about a story of a people coming together through time, since the dawn of time. A story of a people coming together through time since the dawn of time, to the point where we are today, a nation of unions, and quite literally a nation of families. And we talk about that concept in here. And the Nats don't like us talking about that. Whenever we raise those points on social media, they go ballistic. They don't like that at all, because they know it's a powerful point that we're making. Very powerful point. We make a lot of powerful points, ladies and gentlemen, and we do it because of all of you. And so I just want to say thank you very much, everybody, for watching. This has been our 17th Saturday street stall. Check us out tomorrow around about 12:30. We are going to be doing a stunt outside in a certain part of our United Kingdom. There'll be 10 of us, and we're going to be sending out positive vibes to all our family members throughout the length and breadth of our fantastic United Kingdom. And we're going to be welcoming them and saying that Scotland is a welcoming place, because there's still a lot of us unionists here in Scotland to welcome you. Ladies and gentlemen, it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen.